I went through a epiphany when I was in late 40s and took 4 teenagers out west on a 3-week camping trip in the Rockies, thinking I was going to change them because I felt like they needed to become changed in my way of thinking. Well, I was not successful. After 3 weeks with 4 kids, teenagers, hiking and camping and cooking and talking, arguing, debating, they changed me.
Well, I still love to paint from live birds and try to convey their beauty to everyone.
I just am always conscious of the need to take care of what we have. And I taught environmental education for a number of years, so I kind of try to practice what I preach.
Still working on trying to develop that East Basin. It's got about 100,000 acres more that we ought to put in conservation.
This that I had a German nanny when I grew up who raised me outdoors, and one of the things I say, she thought it was a sin to be indoors as the sun was shining, and that made a big impression on me.
And I think we're also rich in people who are interested in conservation.
I think it started from me going outdoors and camping out and spending the night, paddling on rivers, and just generally being outdoors.
It worries me. It certainly worries me. In the 30 years that we have lived here, I've seen the birds' numbers just diminishing every year when I was banding, and I'm not hearing the bird songs like as much as I used to hear. So I know things are changing.
I let everybody in the world know how much I love the outdoors.
This started back, I guess, when I was a teenager. My grandfather bought me a bird dog when I was, I think, about 12 or 13 years old. And from that point on, I've had a love for the outdoors.
Seeking out all these wonderful places, and South Carolina has a lot of them.
I was a bird watcher from this high, and my mother was a bird watcher.
I'd say the good old days for deer and turkeys is right now.
My goal was to learn all I could from the people who were there and who already knew.
When we had our first grandchild and realized how much the world is being destroyed, how much the beauty of South Carolina and the rest of the United States and the world is being destroyed, and we decided that we were going to try to preserve it.
Wildlife has got to be protected for the future generations and everything else. That's about all I know.
All of the honorees were asked to describe themselves in one word. This is how they responded.
One word?
One word.
A word. What a question.
That's tough.
I really can't think of anything.
I'm a conservationist.
Outdoors.
Life.
Caring for the beauty of the natural world. Like, that's not one word, is it?
Swamper. Happy. Anybody 89 years old ought to be happy.
Inquisitive.
Interesting.
Self-motivating.
Intense.
Caring.
Outdoor preservation zone.
I don't think you can describe me in one word. I would say interested.
Reflective.
I'm kind.
I'd say conscientious.
I was going to say wild.
No, you can't.
Unpredictable.
C. Thomas Wyche. Tommy Wyche created the Natural Land Trust in 1973, one of the first land trusts in the state. Natural Land Trust, a nonprofit conservation organization, has been involved in protecting much of South Carolina's mountains, a fragile and ecologically rare area of the southern Appalachians. Wyche's work through the trust led to the protection of thousands of acres of South Carolina's Blue Ridge Escarpment. This area is geologically unique because it not only contains the entire watershed for several mountain streams that support natural trout populations and is largely undeveloped, it is also unique because of its extraordinary relief. During 1974 and 75, as a member of the Legal Advisory Board, Wyche assisted in drafting the South Carolina Heritage Trust Act, which incorporated his trust approach for protecting and preserving natural and historical sites. In the late 1970s, he also successfully lobbied for legislation that gives municipalities and waterworks commissions the right to grant conservation easements on their properties. Additionally, Wyche is an accomplished nature photographer. His photos have raised awareness of the area's beauty. He's also the author of a number of books promoting the outdoors. Needless to say, Wyche has played a key role in ensuring future generations will enjoy iconic natural places. Today we honor C. Thomas Wyche with the title Legend of Conservation. Herman Duff Holbrook. Duff Holbrook, who grew up on the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, hunted, fished, and trapped from an early age. He studied forestry at Virginia Polytechnic Institute, then served as a bomber navigator in Italy in World War II. Following the war, he earned a master's degree from the University of Wisconsin and then worked for the Georgia Game Commission. Holbrook came to the South Carolina Wildlife Department in 1950 with the assignment of trapping turkeys and deer and restocking them in the Sumter National Forest and elsewhere in the state. Holbrook's promotion of his success with the cannon net technique in South Carolina set the stage for wild turkey restoration in Tennessee, across the Southeast, and the nation. It was this technique, more than any other, that was the foundation for today's abundance of wild turkeys in every state across the country. After the deer and turkey restocking program was completed, he retired from the South Carolina Wildlife and Marine Resources Department in 1969 and went to work as a biologist in the Cherokee National Forest. When he retired from the United States Forest Service in 1983, he managed an 18,000-acre private wildlife area in Charleston and Georgetown counties until the year 2000. Among all of his accomplishments, Holbrook is most proud of his work in relocating turkeys and deer across South Carolina. Today we honor Herman Duff Holbrook with the title Legend of Conservation. Mrs. Evelyn Dabbs. In 1970, about the time her children were leaving the nest, Evelyn Dabbs obtained a federal banding permit and began recording the appearance of various bird species near her Sumter home. That same year, she was elected president of the Carolina Bird Club. In 1978, she and her husband Tommy moved to their present home where she's created a nature preserve. The paths roam through the woods so she could take others to view the birds and other wildlife in their natural surroundings. The Dabbs have placed their 378 acres in a trust with the Congaree Land Trust. In the 26 years that followed, Mrs. Dabbs gave banding demonstrations and presentations to more than 8,000 children and adults from throughout South and North Carolina. Records show she has banded more than 14,000 birds and sent the name of the bird, wing measurement, and identification of brooding patches to the government as part of an effort to learn more about bird migrations. She was also instrumental in the establishment of Woods Bay State Park near Olathe, which contains one of the last remaining large Carolina bays on the Atlantic coastal plain. A lifetime of studying birds and other animals was triggered the day a Baltimore oriole landed under her awning and she did not know what it was. Mrs. Dabbs borrowed a neighbor's bird book, and the rest is history. Today we honor Evelyn Dabbs with the title Legend of Conservation. Senator John Drummond. John Drummond flew a P-47 fighter plane in World War II, was shot down, and held in a German prisoner of war camp for 10 months. Drummond received a presidential citation, 3 battle stars, 9 air medals, and 2 Purple Hearts for his service during the war. After the war, Drummond began his career as a businessman and continued life in public service. Drummond served 1 term in the South Carolina House of Representatives before winning a Senate seat in 1967. Drummond was elected as President Pro Tem of the Senate in 1996. He chaired committees on interstate cooperation, labor, commerce and industry, fish, game and forestry, and the Senate Finance Committee. He was known for his high ideals and his pragmatic ability to promote both economic development and environmental protection. His lifelong interest in promoting outdoor ethics and stewardship led him to champion the Conservation Bank, the Palmetto Trail, and continued funding for the Department of Natural Resources. He introduced and fought for critical legislation to protect the state's natural resources and the sportsmen who venture outdoors. Senator Drummond's main objective in the upper chamber was to make sure nobody could do anything to destroy our wonderful state and its wildlife. Today, we honor the Honorable John Drummond with the title Legend of Conservation. Mary Crum. Mary Crum taught biology, chemistry, and physics at Denmark Olar High School, where she was named a star teacher, but her influence on the environment was also evident far from the classroom. In 1977, she was a founding member of the South Carolina Environmental Education Association, a nonprofit group founded to promote environmental education in South Carolina schools. She and Alice Lindler with the South Carolina Department of Education developed an environmental education curriculum outline for teachers. Additionally, she participated in several writing sessions for the Department of Energy's project for an energy-enriched curriculum at the University of Maryland in the late 1970s. Outside of developing environmental curriculum, Crum was appointed to South Carolina's Savannah River Oversight Committee, as well as director of the Garden Clubs of South Carolina's first wildlife project. This made her responsible for implementing the South Carolina Highway Wildflower Project in conjunction with the State Highway Department and Wildlife Department. She was also active in promoting the Garden Club of South Carolina's anti-litter program across the state. Today we honor Mary Crum with the title Legend of Conservation. Lucas Dargan. Lucas Dargan studied wildlife management at North Carolina State University for 2 years, then transferred to Utah State to complete his degree in forestry management. After graduating from Utah State, he went to work with the Colorado State Game and Fish Department on the agency's first Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Research Project. From there, he moved to the Pawtuxet National Wildlife Refuge in Maryland, where he established a forestry management program for wildlife. In 1942, Dargan became a naval officer and served as an engineer on a destroyer assigned to the Atlantic Fleet. After 4 years of active duty, he joined the Naval Reserve and worked for future Senator Nick Ziegler to establish a Naval Reserve unit in Florence. He worked for the Ingram Dargan Lumber Company as a forester from 1948 to 1950, when he became a consulting forester until his retirement in 1997. Dargan was active in many professional natural resources groups, including the American and South Carolina Farm Bureau Federations, South Carolina Water Resources Commission, South Carolina Forestry Association, South Carolina Governor's Advisory Council on Natural Resources, and the Black Creek Land Trust. As a consulting forester in the Pee Dee region for more than 50 years, Dargan appraised timber, sold timber, planted trees, and became an expert at controlling undesirable species in the forest. He estimates he planted more than 1 million trees, mostly pines and some cypress trees. He published numerous articles on forestry-related topics and was often quoted for his exceptional knowledge of forestry and natural resource matters. Today we honor Lucas Dargan with the title Legend of Conservation. Dr. Jacqueline Jackie Jacobs. As a biologist and teacher, Dr. Jacqueline Jacobs educated the public on the need for conservation. She also served as executive director of the South Carolina Wildlife Federation for almost a decade, building the membership into an effective force for conservation in both the private and governmental sectors. Dr. Jacobs was active in promoting environmental education for teachers through special workshops while working with the Federation. She also reached the public through television programs and films. She established an annual youth conservation camp, sponsored in cooperation with the Garden Club of South Carolina, and held conservation mini-summits, family-oriented weekends featuring outdoors skills and workshops. Dr. Jacobs initiated programs to distribute materials to schools on National Wildlife Week and National Hunting and Fishing Day, and involved the Wildlife Federation as a sponsor of the South Carolina Wildlife and Marine Resources Department's Operation Respect program. She also established the organization's monthly newsletter, South Carolina Out of Doors. As is evident, Dr. Jacobs has spent a lifetime teaching others about the value of our natural resources. Today we honor Dr. Jacqueline Jacobs with the title Legend of Conservation. Marion Burnside, Jr. For 4 decades, Marion Burnside has been involved in South Carolina's conservation and wildlife management programs. He served on numerous boards and commissions aiming to preserve the state's natural resources. In 1988, he was appointed to the South Carolina Wildlife and Marine Resources Commission, now the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources Board, serving as chairman of the commission from 1988 through 1994 and chairman of the newly designated Natural Resources Board from 1994 through 1995. Following his tenure as chairman, Burnside then chaired the Department of Natural Resources Conservation, Education, and Communication Advisory Committee from 1996 through 1999. In 2003, the Department of Natural Resources Board named him the first and only Chairman Emeritus of the Natural Resources Board. His leadership on these boards helped state wildlife managers stabilize the deer population and protect the rights of sportsmen and others who venture outdoors. Burnside was also involved in the formation of the Quality Deer Management Association of South Carolina, the organization from which today's national QDMA was born. Additionally, Burnside is president of the Millery Hunt Club, and although he hunts across the United States, Burnside said his fondest memory of time spent outdoors is hosting senior citizens, people with disabilities, and children at the spacious Hunt Club. Today, we honor Marion Burnside, Jr. with the title Legend of Conservation. Dr. Wade T. Batson. Dr. Wade T. Batson, noted educator, writer, plant taxonomist, and World War II veteran, was a much-loved teacher and distinguished researcher at the University of South Carolina from 1952 until his retirement in 1982. Batson always tried to cultivate a sense of responsibility with his students for preserving certain types of flora. Looking for rare plants, it was important to not let the students collect them. They could look at them, write them down in their notes, but absolutely could not pick them up and carry them home. They are rare. It is also known professors like Dr. Batson are rare. During his tenure at USC, his field botany class was always filled. Often his student entourage was joined by other professors and well-known naturalists. Legions of biology students and naturalists will be forever thankful of Batson's interest in the natural world. In fact, many have gone on to become noted scientists and college professors in their own right. Today we honor Dr. Wade T. Batson with the title Legend of Conservation. Dr. and Mrs. Edmund Taylor. Dr. Taylor and his wife, Mary Herbert Taylor, have always led by example in working for the environment. Both have been active in environmental education. Dr. Taylor has led environmental education classes at the Shepherd Center and assisted local schools in establishing outdoor classrooms. Mrs. Taylor established Earth Ministries at Trinity Episcopal Church in Columbia with the goal of having clergy and church members form a close relationship with the natural world. The program has served as a model for other churches around the state. Mrs. Taylor founded the Environmental Task Force in the Episcopal Church Diocese of Upper South Carolina, which later evolved into the Earth Ministry Committee. The Taylors were early supporters and participants with the Congaree Land Trust, providing some of the first easements established by the trust. They have placed a number of parcels in trust in Lexington County, with the combined acreage making it one of the largest tracts of protected urban wetlands in South Carolina. They have encouraged local teachers to take their classes to some of the areas on field trips to study unique habitats, like a bottomland hardwood forest. And the 55-acre Taylor Nature Preserve, part of the Congaree Creek Heritage Corridor Project, is one of the 2 preserves maintained by the South Carolina Wildlife Federation. The Taylors have taken steps to preserve their other properties as well. Maintained both for hunting and wildlife conservation, the Taylors make sure the greatest attention is given to renewing and restoring the land. Dr. and Mrs. Edmund Taylor, from the way they raised their children to their church involvement and their land ethic, they are conservationists. Today we honor Dr. and Mrs. Edmund Taylor with the title Legend of Conservation. Harry Dalton. It wasn't until a 1974 camping trip in the Rocky Mountains with his 4 teenage sons, when Harry Dalton was in his 40s, that his environmental instincts were stirred. Returning home, Dalton resolved to become more intimately involved in conservation and environmental issues. He and his wife, Becca, joined several organizations, including the Sierra Club, with the determination to commit much of their resources to the environmental movement. Harry Dalton has served the Sierra Club in a number of capacities, including chapter fundraising chair for 20 years, as well as past trustee and president of the Sierra Club Foundation. Dalton has also worked diligently on projects close to home. He helped lead the Palmetto Conservation Foundation, the South Carolina Environmental Law Project, and the Nation Forward Land Trust. In 2003, he was a founding board member of the Conservation Voters of South Carolina. The Daltons have helped preserve some 1,800 acres of land. Dalton bought more than 1,500 acres, improved it while he held it for 7 or 8 years, and then gave it to York County in a conservation easement. Today, the area is managed by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources and is visited often by both hunters and naturalists who've discovered some fairly rare species there. The Daltons have a strong sense of community and have worked tirelessly over the years through various civic and church organizations. Today we honor Harry Dalton with the title Legend of Conservation. Coy Johnston. Upon graduation from the University of Georgia in 1952 with a degree in forestry, Coy Johnston served as a platoon leader in the 10th Combat Engineer Battalion of the 3rd Division attached to the Greeks along the 38th parallel in Korea, before launching a 25-year career as a forester with the West Vaco Corporation. Johnston left a very successful career in the timber industry in 1979 to join Ducks Unlimited as its South Carolina Regional Director. He was promoted to East Regional Director for Ducks Unlimited in 1987. In 1989, he joined Ducks Unlimited's Wetlands America Trust Program as Project Director of the Low Country Initiative for the purpose of conserving wildlife habitat. Johnston's leadership in the Low Country Initiative was fortuitous for the state of South Carolina. He was among an initial small group of conservationists that grew into the Ace Basin Task Force, which eventually protected more than 250,000 acres in the 350,000-acre region along the Ashepoo, Combahee, and Edisto rivers. Working on the Ace Basin project, Johnston said, was the most satisfying memory of the time he has spent in the outdoors. Today we honor Coy Johnston with the title Legend of Conservation. Anne Worsham Richardson. No other South Carolinian has done more to portray the avian wildlife of the Palmetto State and North America itself than Anne Worsham Richardson. Exhibitions of her paintings have been shown in museums and galleries from South Carolina to California and Florida to Vermont. She is South Carolina's official painter of the state bird and flower and the state butterfly. Her love of the outdoors came naturally growing up on a farm near Turbeville, where her mother encouraged her to learn about wildlife and its habitat. Her passion for art came even earlier. Combining both passions, Ms. Richardson received a federal permit to maintain a bird sanctuary and rehabilitation center. Large aviaries outside of her home housed hawks, owls, waterfowl, and woodpeckers on the grounds. A modified sunroom housed songbirds. While certain days were reserved for visitors, mostly school children, Ms. Richardson used the Sanctuary and Rehabilitation Center as inspiration for her art. Her life study of birds and their environments, and her love of nature, is evident in the watercolor paintings of wildlife and birds exhibited in her gallery, Bird's Eye View in historic Charleston. Today we honor Anne Worsham Richardson with the title, Legend of Conservation. The Honorable Ernest F. Hollings. After graduation from the Citadel in 1942, Ernest Fritz Hollings was commissioned in the United States Army and served with distinction in the North African and European campaigns in World War II, earning a Bronze Star and 7 campaign ribbons. Following the war, he earned a law degree at the University of South Carolina, and a year later, at the age of 26, was elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives. Hollings served the public for 56 years, 38 years in the United States Senate, and as South Carolina's governor, lieutenant governor, and a member of the South Carolina House of Representatives in his early years. Senator Hollings has had a hand in most of the major conservation achievements in South Carolina and many nationwide over the last half-century. But the conservation effort he is most proud of is that of the Ace Basin, home of the Ernest F. Hollings Ace Basin National Wildlife Refuge. It is now protected from massive development. Hollings helped broker cooperative efforts to preserve the Ace Basin by securing the federal designation as well as funding for every acre contained in both the Ace Basin National Wildlife Refuge and the Ace Basin National Estuarine Research Reserve. The creation of the Ace Basin, Hollings said, is among the fondest memories of his public service. Today, we honor the Honorable Ernest F. Hollings with the title, Legend of Conservation. Anne Springs Close. Anne Springs Close had a very strong environmental influence on her life, her German governess. Her love of the outdoors led Ms. Close to dedicate her life to protecting and improving the quality of the environment. In 1981, Ms. Close became chairwoman of the Francis Lee Springs Foundation, which later became the Springs Close Foundation. Under her leadership, the foundation has provided financial support for educational, recreational, and philanthropic organizations in Chester, Lancaster, and York counties. She also served in leadership roles with the National Recreation and Park Association, the Wilderness Society, American Farm Trust, and the Palmetto Trail. Mrs. Close has left a lasting impression on her children, for the Close children have followed in their mother's footsteps as conservation champions. In 1990, she and her 8 children designated 2,300 acres of land near Fort Mill to serve as an environmental sanctuary for local residents. The Anne Springs Close Greenway opened in 1995. Protected from development and rich in natural and cultural history, the Greenway is used for hiking, biking, horseback riding, and fishing, as well as serving as an outdoor classroom for teachers and students. The area contains a 28-acre lake, as well as 4 other fishing ponds, and features several habitats from mixed hardwood forests to local prairies. The Anne Springs Close Greenway is considered to be the preeminent endowment of her philanthropic legacy. Today we honor Anne Springs Close with the title Legend of Conservation. The honorees were asked, what do you think the future holds for South Carolina's out of doors? And this is how they responded.
The DNR department is going to need some more money to do what they have in mind of doing, of what needs to be done.
Prominent areas that would not be destroyed or involved in any way, left natural.
That we would develop more forest and start saving, more protecting the property, like swamps particularly.
I hope, I'm 87 now, and I've finished 2 successive 30-year professional careers, and I got a good start on the 3rd one. I wonder if I could finish that one.
Way to make a living, selling timber for other landowners.
The future outdoors is to keep them outdoors, not get them indoors.
Well, I hope we can continue to let people know how to save this world instead of destroying it.
The citizens of the country would recognize the importance of protecting natural habitat for our wildlife and for humanity.
I just hope young people will get the message and take care of what little of the natural land is left around here.
I like to see conservation ethics protected resources in the state of South Carolina.
We're beginning to realize what we've got and beginning to save them, as many of them as possible.
To see the work continuing that the Wildlife Federation has been carrying out.
My hope for South Carolina, and particularly upstate South Carolina, is to protect the open lands and forests and rivers.
The hope for the future would be that our future generations will do a better job of conserving than, unfortunately, I think our generation has. We've been the consumers.
There will be an increase of interest in conservation comparable to the increase in population and utilization of our natural resources.
I hope and pray that everybody's left try to preserve it for the future.